Chapter 19. David did not want to have this discussion in the kitchen. I told you, dating isn't my thing. What made John bring it up after David made his stand clear? How did you know Naomi asked me out? He had enough to handle without a woman in the middle, and he wanted out of this conversation. He wanted John's help to form a plan and find some leverage to change the county worker's mind about removing Charlie. Whoa, back up. My sister asked you out? Not out exactly. Just a walk in the bay. And you said no? John sliced a knife down the center of a cubed cut of chicken, revealing a tinge of pink in the middle, then continued stirring. What's the deal, man? David transferred the heated noodles into a bowl, then added more oil and pasta to the wok. She can do better. John crossed his arms and leaned a hip to the counter. Better like who? Brian? Sure. You're a knuckle-dragger, brother. Why do you think I encouraged her to work at Westside? I talked her out of pursuing the classes she had scheduled this summer for her teacher's credentials. What was John saying? He set them up? I never pegged you as a matchmaker. I try to be flexible. David removed the last batch of pasta from the wok, then added the vegetables. You should have said something before disrupting her plans. You don't know everything. About what? Me. And I'm not here to find a girl. She's not just any girl. John grabbed the tongs back from David's hands and turned off the burner. The chicken's done. Why'd he have to sound so dejected? Put it in this bowl. David handed one over. Sean let out a squeal while balancing the hamster on his head. It's Leon's turn, David called over the movie din. Perfect time for a handoff. The two younger boys managed the exchange better than expected. Leon's face brightened as he cradled the critter close to his chest. Now what? John asked. Can you handle the kusa sauce? Ain't there any way you trust me? John spread his hands, parroting the line from Princess Bride in his Inigo Montoya accent. Sorry. Couldn't help it. With the sauce, sure, he trusted Jonathan, just not with women. Nothing comes to mind. I can't swear on a no account, father, but I admit it. You are better than I am. He was mixing up the lines. I know something you don't know. It was David's turn for the accent. Hey, that's my line. John faked a pout. Get used to disappointment. The guy couldn't read minds. David had nothing to offer and wouldn't impose such a deprived state on a relationship with John's sister. Can you handle the sauce or not? You said you didn't trust me. With women, no, but as sous chef, you are wonderful, David enunciated with his hands splayed. Thank you. I've worked hard to become so. John measured out the ingredients into the jar and gave it a good shake. Pour the sauce over these vegetables, now, and add the meat. David sprinkled grated ginger, then handed the spatula to John. Just heat it through until the sauce thickens. From the high cupboard to the left of the sink, David pulled out a large stack of plates and set them on the bar, then added wide cups filled with silverware. He returned to the stove, forked a broccoli stem, and brought it to his lips, savoring Asian flavors intensified by his hunger. John stopped stirring. Why do you see her as above you? Is it Jesse, the way he and your brothers treated you? Your mom? Keep stirring or the food will scorch. How did his mother fit into this discussion? His past left no haunting residue in his daily life, right? Ruth thought him unguarded and leaving his heart vulnerable by attaching to the kids. John thought him too guarded. Which was it? His sense of identity slipped from his grasp like greasy noodles from a spoon. I just know I'm supposed to be here. And he needed John's help to convince Ruth and Sharon to let Charlie stay at Westside. Right? But suddenly, he wasn't so sure about anything. What made him an expert? His chest squeezed the air from his lungs. Adrenaline pumped through his suddenly confused brain, seized by fear, anticipation. His pulse rushed, ready for a non-existent fight. What was he afraid of? Failure. failing Charlie, just like he failed Damon and Joseph? Did he also fear Naomi's rejection, like his mother? He held no control over anything. He thought he could stop the seemingly inevitable fate for Charlie. The belief offered a sense of hope. Was that so wrong? But was it hope? Or just a coping intervention, a means to go on and believe he had things in hand? He could prevent devastation. Could he claim the steps that enabled him to save Josephina? He was no prophet, made no precise plan to catch up within seconds of her demise, so should he claim the wrong moves resulting in Damon and Joseph's deaths, or Charlie's failed placement? Perhaps not. Still, he recalled a split second when he thought better of his decisions, a catch in his spirit he ignored. He wanted to shrink in a corner and never emerge. How would he ever get it right? He felt exhausted from climbing treacherous crags around his weaknesses, covering his inner darkness with outward service, and confusing his mission with grand plans to prevent all the maybes and what-ifs. Certainty rang with pearls of comfort, but none of his attempts to dominate the outcomes resulted in solace. He suddenly recognized the foolishness of seeking assurance in his own efforts. He knew better than to see too much in himself. If love stood as his responsibility, why take on the burden of taming its unpredictable outcome? Fear gripped his neck, reminding him why he held so tightly to his need for control. Fear of failure, fear of tragedy, fear of everything outside his command. What might happen if he let go of his hero complex, stopped thinking he held the secret to release goodness in the world if only he found enough keys, matching the right locks? "Dude, this seems thick," John said while mixing the kusa sauce with the vegetables and meat. "Should I turn off the stove?" "What? Oh, yeah." David shook himself back to task. John demonstrated confidence, intelligence, strong leadership qualities, so it grated when he looked to David for direction. He envisioned locking himself in his room until he found his identity again. He combined the meat mixture with the chow mein noodles in a large bowl and added a large spoon and fork for serving. "I spoke with my no-account father today," John said. "Seriously? How? I thought he disappeared when you were little." "Me too. Mom gave me his number after Helena and I announced our engagement this morning, said I might want to invite him to the wedding, or at least make him aware of my upcoming marriage. I've wanted to contact him since I was 4, when he walked out of our lives. She's kept his whereabouts from us all this time." John's tone held no resentment, only grief. "What did your father say?" John leaned on the bar. "My nerves are still on edge from the conversation. I asked if he wanted to meet, mentioned my fiancé and my plan to seek employment. He invited me to stay at his beachfront estate in Newport before the wedding, to transition, and even mentioned a job offer. Cha-ching. And to think he's lived so close all this time. Will you go? It's an opportunity to discover more about him. When I questioned Mom, she said a lot can change in 22 years, so I should see for myself. His place sounds exquisite. I want you to come." "Sure. I'd love to meet your dad. I could visit during one of my breaks." The reality of John leaving Westside hit like a faceplant on cement. "I mean, maybe it's time for you to move on to the next thing." "Like what?" David wasn't ready to leave Westside. He needed to get used to the idea of a new co-worker. John was getting married. Best friends couldn't do everything together, though they gave it their best shot, pairing up all their lives at the same schools and classes, teaming up in ministry and employment. They rode dirt bikes in the mud, climbed rocks, and scaled mountain peaks together. "Take a break and recover," John said. "Get right with God. Date my sister." "Why'd I ask?" "You may not see it, David, but there's something special about you. Naomi sees it too, but she won't wait forever. She needs a reason to hope." "How will your elopement work, anyway? Who's invited?" David figured immediate family. No room for friends. With John engaged and moving away, their lives were drifting apart. Perhaps it was time to cut ties with the Kish family altogether. John refilled the napkin holder on the table. Our mothers made a big fuss over our quick courthouse wedding idea. Now we're planning a simple ceremony at a church with the most important people in our life. Will you be my best man? What? Dude, you mean it? David lacked the strength to fight the tears. To take part in this life-altering celebration with his closest bud filled him with equal parts joy and heart-wrenching ache. He pulled John's head down and kissed both cheeks as their Jewish ancestors would have done on such an occasion. Yes, of course. I didn't expect. I thought you'd have a private family-only affair. David turned and swiped his arm over his face. Were the boys watching? He preferred not to send the wrong message. Leon came running into the kitchen with Sandy tucked like a fluff ball in the crook of his arm. What is that smell? His handsome flat face shone with a rare excitement, as though he'd just found out he could go home. David stooped to the boy's level. You requested chow mein for your special meal, right? Mama makes chow mein. So I've heard. David held out his hands. Let me have Sandy and wash up. Leon obeyed with a skip toward the bathroom. As David rose, he felt a grip on his shoulder. John raised a brow. Besides my bride, I want you at my wedding more than anyone. He smacked the back of David's head. Though relieved to put aside the subject of Naomi, he suddenly desired for her to share this moment of celebration with them in this kitchen, and return to how they were as kids. Were his desires to maintain the simplicity of former years juvenile? How could he with such dramatic changes emerging among all of them? Reality declared him an adult with a ministry, and if God had other plans for his life, it stretched past his comprehension. Not that he wanted it any other way. The troubles of the day were enough without figuring the future. But his bond with the Kish family latched tighter than his own family, and the thought of cutting ties sent liquid graphite through his veins. Would God ask it of him? Chapter 20. David put Sandy back in her cage, came downstairs, and turned off the TV. Dinner time, boys. Line up at the bar. They crowded into more of a chaotic huddle than a line, pushing and shoving. How was he supposed to keep boundaries with the boys while his life burst out of containment? Miguel maneuvered to the front of the line. Typical. Well, line them up, anyway? What started such an institutional tradition? Why not sit and pass the food, family style? At a snail's pace, Miguel took his plate and glanced back at the others with a smug grin. Charlie stiffened. Hurry, Miguel. The boy's internal pot appeared past a slow boil. Any more heat and he'd explode. Was it possible to break this cycle of rage? Stop his routine blow-ups? The kid was due. Make me. Miguel offered the perfect blowtorch. Charlie plowed his head into Miguel's stomach, pushing him across the kitchen and into the trash can. The pliable bin compressed to the wall with Miguel's body weight, then both the bin and Miguel ricocheted to the floor. Charlie, I think you need some space. John motioned toward Charlie's bedroom. With an arm across the food bar, Charlie bulldozed the silverware, the stack of melamine plates, and the large bowl of chow mein off the counter. David grabbed Miguel by the arm and tugged him out of the way before the clanging disaster exploded across the floor as though in slow motion. Noodles, broccoli, and sauce spewed over the dining area like a gooey lava eruption. Charlie marched upstairs without looking back. Nobody move, David said. They all froze, including John. Leon gazed down at his special meal, now a splattered mess. Sorry buddy, David said, with a sympathetic pat on the back. We'll make your meal again another night. Shoulders slumped, Leon nodded. All heads in the kitchen turned down the hall as a loud thump came from above, then a crash. David studied Miguel for injury. You okay? Charlie's punked, man. Right. And if you think creating problems is fun, you can enjoy the consequences. David spread his hands. The disaster in this kitchen, and whatever is going on upstairs, is half your responsibility." With a cautious step around Saucy Puddles, he handed his wallet over to John. "Why don't you take these guys to Bob's Corner Burgers? I'll hold down the fort with the Cyclone." "Sweet." Sean bumped fists with Tommy. David returned his focus to Miguel. "You're getting a kid's burger and cleaning up half this mess when you return. No complaining, or you miss summer outings for a week. Understand?" "Yes," Miguel said, then rolled his lower lip to the side. John held up David's wallet. "Sure about this?" "Yeah, and take your time. Mopping up Charlie's part of the aftermath could take all night considering the clamor still coming from upstairs. I'll see you're reimbursed." "Don't worry about it." They were an excellent team, and John understood David like no other. The dramatic changes ahead left him spinning. The thought of everyday life without John or Charlie left him bereft. Already he ached for the connection with Charlie he thought they'd gained last night and puzzled over his next move. All day he'd faced his shortcomings. He should have let John have a go with Charlie this time. What sort of strategy existed to disarm the renegade without breaking the hint of trust budding between them? He wanted to ask John's advice earlier, but lost the chance. Soon he'd lose his sounding board and dependable source of recourse. Or had his friend already offered his counsel? "Your responsibility is to love." What did that mean, exactly? Love how? David hated the idea of learning to work with someone else, but he needed to roll along or get squashed. Besides, no distance or major altering of life station would sever their brotherly bond. Not if he could help it. David headed for the stairs to assess the damage. The racket of paper ripping, boxes banging, and plastic crashing against plastic broadcasted the ongoing riot in the John Deere room. Charlie tossed the papers, pencils, and backpacks off the two homework desks. The toys and boxes he tugged off the shelves landed on the rising mountain in the center of his room with a crash. After sliding out his drawer, second from the bottom of the dresser, he stripped it bare of all the clothes and found what he wanted rolling to the corner with a thump. Drawing up the flat rock, he rubbed his thumb over the smooth surface, back and forth, but the numbness he craved refused to come this time. The room blurred. He stuck the stone in his pocket as his rage focused on finishing the destruction he started. He ripped out the rest of the drawers and dumped them on the center pile, then tore everything off the hangers in the closet, adding them to the heap. He shredded notes, stomped on game boxes, and smashed weird popsicle crafts. Exhausted, he slid to the floor in the corner of his room, as his fury left. Was it enough to get kicked out? He just wanted everyone to leave him alone. He'd lost his guts to run away earlier, but there were other ways to escape. "You know, we needed to get rid of all the unwanted junk in here," David said, leaning in by the door. "Your pile in the middle of the room idea could make the chore easier. What do you think?" Grown-ups were crazy space invaders from the moon, and they made no sense. But Charlie kept his mouth locked. Leaning over, he drew the rock from his pocket and rolled it between his fingers, ignoring David. The guy stepped up to the stack and drew out a yellowish t-shirt full of holes. "What are these ragamuffins' clothes doing in here, anyway?" He tiptoed over the heap of clutter and sat next to Charlie against the wall. Every part of him tightened. His skin pricked. He wanted to mouth off, curse the stupid man until he went away, but invisible hands choked his throat, trapping the words. He sank into the corner, small as possible. David pointed to the stone. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Charlie slid the rock back in his pocket, then drew his knees tighter to his chest. "Nanya. None of the guy's business. The dude knew too much already." Leaning forward, David grabbed a pair of pants from under a board game. "These yours?" "Yeah," Charlie hissed out. Under a box on the pile, his jet poked out with a broken wing. What busted it? Him tossing things around? There'd been another just like it in that first home, back when Charlie still took pride in his big brother, his protector, the one who helped Charlie build the first model plane. David frowned at the jeans. They look too small to be yours. You think? Moses gave him sweet man-sized dickies cut below the knees, and that's all he needed. Any day his county worker would pick him up and move him out of here too, unless Charlie ran first. So why was he still here? He had a perfect chance to go AWOL from school. What an idiot to think for 1 minute he could stay out of trouble, to believe himself smart enough to find a way. Nothing worked, not Aaron's rock, not the games in his head. Running away didn't even help, and he liked. He stopped that thought. He better keep hating this place if he knew what was good for him. After wadding the old pants, David threw them out the door into the hall. We'll try them on one of the younger boys. He took the broken aircraft from under the box. Are you familiar with this jet? A pulse ticked in Charlie's neck. He lost the first plane years ago but got this one from his last home, and the volunteer helped him glue it together. Or 2 homes ago? Whatever. The volunteer was cool, but Charlie hated the place and worked to get kicked out of there. But the model airplane brought back good memories, times when a happy ending seemed possible for him and Darren, once a family adopted them or they found a golden ticket in a gutter to a Candyland life of never-ending fun. Now he only wanted to forget. His brother and dead parents meant nothing, not anymore. Why care when they never cared about him? No one cared. This is a U.S. Air Force F-15, David said. My brother flies one of these. Cool. If it was true. But duh. David was playing some kind of buddy game, and Charlie wouldn't fall for it. Still, he wanted to ask. You mean, like, a real fighter jet with bombs and everything? Yeah, in the Gulf War. Brent deployed again on special assignments in the Middle East 4 years ago. He remains stationed in Saudi Arabia, last I heard. His brother fought in actual wars? Sweet. So you're younger? By 6 years. Aaron was 18 now and on his own unless he still hung with the Shaggy Bear Man. Maybe he'd join the army and get himself killed. The thought relaxed Charlie's tight shoulders. Is your brother nice? David frowned. Most know him as a hero. But I never got along with him. Do you have a brother? Charlie reached for the ripped box with a picture of a pair of dice and tiny houses on the front and banged it like a drum. He hated when David did that thing he did, figured stuff out. Did he know more about Charlie's life, find some magic mirror that showed his past? Could he see them in the trailer when the water rose past the floor? He huddled close to Aaron on the pull-out couch, unable to sleep as the roof dripped on his head. His teeth chattered as his wet clothes clung to his skin and his hands held his hungry belly. Aaron reached past the soggy cushions and into the mud seeping in through the door, pulled out the slimy stone, and handed it to Charlie. We're just rocks, you and me. No matter what happens, we feel nothing. What made David ask about the stupid airplane? He should mind his own business. Charlie kept up the beat of the game box banging against his palm. Chapter 21. David sensed Charlie watching as he swept aside the junk on the floor with his foot, set a receptacle near the center of the room, and tied a fresh liner around the rim. He raised the aircraft from Charlie's bed and held it above the black hole. Do you have any attachment to this? No. Charlie's expression spoke otherwise, but the junk in the boys' room needed cleaning out. David released the broken F-15, and it fell with a swish of the bag and a thump at the bottom. Okay, bud. Let's get this pile clean. We'll start by dividing everything by owner. With his eyes fixed on the bin, Charlie's face flushed, and his shoulders twitched. David's gut clenched. What if he went about this all wrong? He continued to offer directions for sorting through the belongings, hoping normalcy helped the kids stay present. Anything broken or ragged goes in the receptacle. He wanted a holy t-shirt and tossed it in the trash. How's that sound? Would Charlie zone out on him again? Okay. The tone was normal, but Charlie's gaze remained fixed on the trash can, until he dragged himself up on wobbly legs and moved things around, undirected. Indecision churned in David's gut. He wanted to reconnect with Charlie, but also consider his responsibilities as a staff member, a guardian to all the boys in his care. Charlie's teacher made it all too clear he fell short. Miss Kathy's grip on his arm still rankled as she informed him Charlie wore the same clothes every day. David tossed out what resembled a popsicle stick house coming unglued. He set a stack of A+ homework assignments labeled with the name Moses Beasley on his bed, unchecked the tag on a black t-shirt with the initial, MS, folded the shirt, and laid it on Miguel's bed. He turned, finding Charlie watching. Charlie spun back to the task, helping for real this time, discarding a handful of past-use dollar store trinkets and ripped coloring pages. He figured things out by observation more so than by verbal directives. Most of the pile moved to the trash until the can overflowed. David grabbed another liner. "Wanna slide out the full bag, while I put in a fresh one?" "All right." Charlie often cooperated when he was given an option and understood the request. Demands rarely worked with the youth in David's care, as though an ingrained rebellion set them against force. God created humans in a garden of freedom, not as stringed puppets on a stage. Sure, he made demands but placed his creation in a world of choice. Charlie tipped the bag the wrong way, and David swooped in to stop the spill. He demonstrated how to tie a knot at the top of the bag and instructed Charlie to set the sack in the hall. Upon his return, David handed over a row of empty hangers. "Will you set these in the closet?" Charlie followed the instructions without hesitating, appearing eager for the next task. What made him cooperate with David to clean his room when so few cooperate with God while he helps to clean our disorder fashioned from poor choices? David aided Charlie with placing the dresser drawers in the grooves, then they slid them into place. "I think we're down to the items on your bed," he said. "Why don't you pull out any clothes you don't wear?" Instead, Charlie grabbed his black Vans tee, 2 boxer briefs, and a belt. "This is all I want." He put his belongings in his drawer, second from the bottom. "You need pants. T-shirts. What happened to your socks and other boxers?" "I don't know." He pointed to the clothes on his bed from his last home. "Those are too small." "Why didn't you say something?" How many other needs fell through the cracks? What kind of guardian failed to provide for their child? He wasn't a true parent, only acting as one for young men with moms and dads imprisoned by despair, drugs, or jail time. Still, the boys deserved better than him. What part of his life prepared him for such everyday responsibilities as parenting? If he moved on, as John wanted, another candidate could take his place, someone more qualified. A crease formed between Charlie's brows. "It doesn't matter." "It matters, Charlie. And I'm sorry. My lack of attention to your needs is unacceptable." How could David be so blind not to notice the neglect before now? "I'll take you clothes shopping ASAP." Even the black sweatshirt Charlie wore every day had a tear on the front pocket. "Like, brand new?" Charlie's pinched expression softened. "You'll take me?" "Unless you prefer Ruth or John." David would talk with Ruth first thing in the morning. "I don't care." "Then I'll take you," David said. Was it his imagination, or had Charlie just stood taller? They could leave during David's afternoon off time. Save one of the activity staff from staying back with him during their outing. The thought brought hope for the kid to succeed on a one-on-one excursion without a problem. And maybe have fun. David held the pair of swim trunks John gave to all the boys for the first summer swimming activity. "What about these?" Charlie shook his head. "I'll never use them." The tag still hung from the waist. An outburst of temper kept him home that first swim day, and every other pool or beach activity this summer. "Keep them," David said. "Just in case." Charlie grabbed the trash sack from the hall, swung it behind his shoulder the same as David, and followed him downstairs. The guy went all quiet as he dropped the empty bin at the end of the meal bar, then continued out the back door and into the side yard, unlike up in the room when he kept talking talking, asking Charlie to put the hangers in the closet, his clothes in the dresser, papers in the garbage. A car horn honked on a distant street. A big bird with a long beak flew above with a screech. An urge to escape this skinny space between the fence and the side of the house forced a tightness all over Charlie's body, as if some hidden danger waited in the shadows. He wanted out of here right this minute, needed to run, had to escape before. "So, Charlie, what sort of music do you like?" David set his sack in the can and motioned with his head for Charlie to do the same. "Duh, rap." The urge to go AWOL a moment ago disappeared. "Not everyone is into rap, you know," David said, as he returned around the corner toward the back door. "Some kids go for Backstreet Boys or Ace of Base." Charlie followed. "I'd rather listen to Sean's screaming tantrums." David laughed. "Yeah, me too." He handed Charlie a pair of doctor gloves from under the sink. "You can start picking food off the floor and put it in the kitchen trash." David pulled another black liner from a box, tied it on the can, then jogged around the mess toward the office. What was he doing? Charlie pulled on the first glove, but his fingers caught and stretched in the wrong places. He tugged it off and tried again until all his fingers were in the right spot on one hand. The glove felt weird on his skin and stuck out on top. Too big. How would he get on the other? He hated this and remembered just how useless he was at everything. He couldn't do squat. A cool beat blared from the boombox sitting on the top shelf of the TV stand. No way. David listened to rap? Since the tune settled the friction in his bones, Charlie tried the other glove, but his fingers still poked the wrong places. Idiot. But then David was there, reaching down and tugging the glove from Charlie's hand with a snap, then scrunching the opening to his lips, blowing the fingers all fat and full of air. Charlie couldn't help grunting a laugh, though he frowned as David rubbed the five-fingered balloon over Charlie's head, making his hair stand up, then released the air in his face. He wasn't a kid. Still, the sweet tunes made his chin bob to the beat, and his hand slipped in the glove the right way this time, as David held it open and tugged it on, no problem. Without a word, David stepped away and disappeared into the cleaning closet. What was his gig? Most staff yelled, "Get a move on or what's your deal? Are you stupid or something?" Charlie tipped the can on its side, scooped food in his hands, and flung it into the trash. He deserved the turning of his stomach and tried not to gag. It wasn't so bad, really, and with no annoying kids around, and with sweet bass buzzing the speakers, he almost liked it here. For a moment, he might come close to having fun and didn't want it to end. When would the other boys return? He leaned forward with more cramping in his stomach. He hoped they stayed away for a long time. David returned as the first song ended. "What did you think of the tune?" Charlie sat back. "Not bad. Never heard it before." "They're a Christian group," David said, as he wheeled a mop cart into the kitchen. So maybe just the church tunes were cheesy, along with the people there who acted weird. But David played cool music on guitar and he was a church guy, wasn't he? Charlie scraped up the last of the food pieces off the floor. "I'm done." But no, he still had to wipe the walls, chairs, and counters with a soapy rag. After that, David handed over the handle to the mop sitting in the rolling bucket filled with steamy bubble water. Couldn't be too hard. Charlie had watched David and John do it plenty of times. Just as Charlie followed David's directions to pull the lever to squeeze out the extra water, John appeared through the door to the garage, and in came the funny farm with their bickering, barking, and belching. Perfect? How embarrassing. Charlie wanted to run or hide, but he tried to act tough like David since nothing about him or the way he cleaned looked sissy. John told the herd to head upstairs for showers, except for Miguel, who stood there ignoring Charlie. Good thing, because if he said one word. Chapter 22. After rolling the bucket to the front of the bar, Charlie mopped over the worst part of the saucy mess. "What am I supposed to do?" Miguel asked. Nobody in particular. His pink ears stood out and his nose expanded as he looked around the mostly clean kitchen. David explained to John about the toys and clothes left on the beds in the John Deere room, then put Miguel on dish duty. The rodent had to clean too? Well, good then, since he was the one who started the whole thing. David folded his arms with his gaze on Charlie. I think we should set your cyclone loose in the other bedroom and let you clean there as well. Charlie stilled the mop. Funny. Actually, you've applied yourself, cooperated, and done a careful job. You'll make a hard-working employee someday if you learn to control your temper. John messed up Charlie's hair. Splendid job on the cleaning, bud. No one said nice things to him unless they were playing one over. Were they messing with him? He didn't think so, but the staff here confused him. I'm working hard, Miguel said, as if saying the words made it true. The rat only worked at gaining attention while lying, cheating, and screwing around. But David was no idiot. Let's see. He leaned over the bar to scan the sink. Might help to scrub, rinse, and put the dishes on the drying rack if you plan on finishing sometime tonight. Moving them around in the suds isn't getting you anywhere. Miguel held up his soapy fingers. You mean I have to wash 'em all? Is that a complaint? Miguel's black eyes bugged out of his face. No. Never mind. I'll do it. After reaching over to ruffle Miguel's hair, David scrubbed his hands in the dish soap. Charlie's good feelings turned angry again. Why care if David paid attention to Miguel? It didn't matter. Charlie cared for no one and never would again. He felt for the bump in his pocket, remembering his way to survive, to change his feelings to stone, and never break. But the powers had died. David grabbed the to-go bags John had left on the counter. Hey, mop boy. Charlie rested his tired head on the stick. Who, me? Are you holding a mop? Yeah. I must mean you. You're done. Wash your hands and come eat. After using the bathroom sink to wash, Charlie returned to find a small to-go drink on the table beside a sack with his name in black marker on the top flap. In the next chair, David slouched in his seat while sliding his meal from a bag with his name. Charlie wanted to grab his dinner and hide in a dark corner of the garage where no one would. The thought skidded out in his brain. No one would what? His fear made no sense. Part of him needed to run. Another part clung to this place like the little flies on the peaches in the hanging basket. This was bad. Ruth said his behavior would decide if he stayed or left. What happened when he left here with no rock of protection, no stories, or David's music? No staff, anywhere, ever helped him with a mess like he made tonight. He'd lose it all. Tears made him blink as he sat down and removed his burger and fries from his bag. He didn't deserve to eat, not even a kid's burger, though the smell tempted his rumbling stomach. David bowed his head, then unwrapped a cheeseburger and stared at it. He reached for the carton of fries, poured a few on the wrapper, then turned to Charlie. His chest pumped fast, seeing the dark skin under David's eyes. Are you sick or something? Charlie asked. Because if something bad happened to David. But he smiled. I'm fine. Just a little past hunger, I guess. He picked up a fry and nibbled the tip. I'd recommend an apology to you-know-who, but... David leaned closer. Wait until later. He's not ready. Apologizing was, like, a big deal to David, but he had Miguel pegged. The rodent would screech when he realized Charlie messed up his stuff. Best to keep some distance. Miguel raised his eyes from the sink. Who's not ready? We'll talk later. David sounded serious. Don't forget how it started. Your provocation needs to stop, and I suggest preparing your apology. Why do I have to? Later, Miguel, David interrupted. Finish the dishes. The punk wouldn't mean it if he said sorry, but Charlie deserved no apology, anyway. He ruined their dinner and destroyed the stuff in their room. Some sort of ugliness inside him made it so hard to behave, And what could he do when everything made him so mad? He pushed his burger away. "Why aren't you eating?" David asked. "Something on your mind?" Charlie rubbed a drop running down the side of his drink. The words turned him the size of a nasty bug. Still, he had to say them. "I'm sorry I got mad and ruined everyone's dinner." A scared kid tone came out of his mouth. "I forgive you," David said, in the same voice he used while praying last night, then patted him on the back. "I appreciate you saying that. You have a good heart." "No, I don't." How could David say that? Charlie's heart was full of dirty mop water, so why was he trying to be good again? He already blew it, proved to Ruth he wanted to leave, and it was too late to change her mind. David unwrapped Charlie's food and set it before him. "It's called mercy, son, when we deserve condemnation, punishment for breaking the rules, but receive a clean slate." David slid the food closer to Charlie. "If I eat my hamburger, will you take a bite of yours? You should send me to bed without food. Then I get fired. It's against the rules to withhold nutrition from a growing young man." David raised another French fry, and it flopped to the side. "Though this hardly counts. Would you prefer a vegetarian style, rice, beans, and greens?" Charlie didn't want David fired. "Never mind. This is fine." He took up the little burger and stuffed half in his mouth with one bite. David laughed. "That's it, bud. No one here condemns you for your problems. We only want what's best for you." His smile sank. "When I say you have a good heart, it's because I see your regret for hurting others and your efforts to improve. Such a heart is ripe for mercy." Charlie took a smaller bite and tried to understand, but he looked down on himself when he messed up, condemned himself. They all looked down on him, didn't they? A clean slate? Even after his trouble tonight, his problems from the past, and his teeth marks, right there on David's arm, for anyone to notice? Why call him son? When good things come for free, unearned, or undeserved, it's called grace. David rested a hand on Charlie's head. "Blessed is the man who delights in every good thing. It's all grace. For no one earns or deserves God's goodness, but He still sends us blessings." If Charlie had a dad like him, he'd be okay. He'd start over, try harder, and do better. He'd do anything to stay at West Side. Maybe he could find a way. He ate the rest of his meal and enjoyed every bite. Chapter 23. I have no excuse. Sitting on the backyard picnic table, with his bare feet on the bench and guitar resting on his leg, David pressed a palm to his heart. "I've failed to meet one of Charlie's most basic needs." Ruth cocked her head. "You've skipped your breaks too often already." She'd emerged from the back sliding door with an obvious intent to speak with him, but nothing struck David as more important than getting Charlie some decent clothes. With the guys off to summer school and John running errands, David emerged outside in the back, hedged-in space to an onshore breeze. To fill his drained reserves, he maintained his daily ritual of solitude and spiritual nourishment. Still, his well of inner strength remained in a desperate state of drought. David placed his instrument in its case next to his leather-bound Bible. If a shorter time off shows Charlie his needs matter, it's worth the sacrifice. The overdue deed left David wondering what qualified him for this job, and not for the first time. Surely a cautious parent noticed when their child owned no socks or when their toes gaped from holes in their shoes. But not him. He was the sort to drive the boys outside to splash barefoot in rain puddles or to climb the low olive branches, and both times Ruth berated his recklessness. "Your exceptional judgment one moment fizzles to such foolishness the next," she had said on one such occasion. Had he lost some parental instinct? He experienced little of his father's care and held no memory of his mother's love. The best he received from his brothers were the threadbare sneakers, faded t-shirts, and tattered shorts or jeans he found while taking out their trash. Since working at West Side, David experienced caretaking demands far exceeding his most radical expectations and faced challenges that illuminated why many parents faltered. It stood to reason Jesse's efforts fell short, raising 4 boys on his own. It took everything in a man to accept the role of caretaker and express paternal love. It might prove insufficient, but he set his mind to gather all the tattered pieces of himself for this one task. Charlie needs clothes, and me taking him this afternoon frees both summer staff to supervise the other boys at the pool. I'm sure Glenn and James will appreciate that. Ruth stretched her neck. But if Charlie survived a month here with minimal clothing, he'll live through one more day. David stood on the bench. One more day? Ruth, what are you saying? She shielded her eyes from the sun. A seat in the shade sounds lovely, don't you think? She scooted 2 plastic chairs under the patio, plonked herself down in one, and fanned herself. He hopped off the bench and slouched in the chair next to her. What's happening? I just got off the phone with Charlie's county worker. She found a place more conducive to his needs and wants him packed and ready tomorrow afternoon by 3. David jumped up again and faced her. Tomorrow? He wrapped an arm over his face. Lord, please, no. He needed more time. I'm sorry, David. I'm not sure what more to say. He dropped his arm. If last night's incident plays a role in this, it's a misunderstanding. Charlie never wanted to act out nor asked for the turmoil raging a war inside him. Sure, everyone handles their own behavior, but Christ's all-knowing grace takes all things into account. He sees the chain reaction, the origin of evil imposed on the innocent, then innocence growing into the next generation of darkness. Only love helps eyes open to the truth that restores light. Charlie followed David all morning, helping with breakfast, and asking every few seconds if the potato pancakes were golden brown yet. So how do I know when to flip the... What do you call these? Latkes, David had said. Take in the scent and wait until your mouth waters. Then it's ready. The boy's heart of stone had melted into an annoying yet tender desire for approval and acceptance, open and desperate for love. What would he find at a restrictive boys' home in L.A.? David paced the grass line along the edge of the patio, then paused. You said we had until the end of this week to change Sharon's mind. She changed her mind, just not as you hoped. Ruth gripped the arms of the chair. Did Charlie truly build a 5-foot heap of belongings in the middle of their room? I forgot my tape measure. If only Charlie could pile up all the junk in his life and haul it to an incinerator. But at the moment, David wanted to burn the county workers' plans and flush the ash down the toilet. Ruth nodded. He needs stricter consequences before his behaviors turn criminal, and he's in real trouble. She tilted her head as if to say, it's obvious, David. Get your head on straight. Instead, she pressed her point. He assaulted 4 kids at school in the last 3 weeks, resulting in several expulsions. You'll never know the hoops I've jumped through to dissuade parents from pressing charges, and I'm talking permanent marks on his record. David's failure to manage Charlie's behaviors mounted with every word. Ruth had a point. He'd turn 18 in 4 years, held accountable as an adult. Thoughts of him as a future delinquent made his head pound. Little tolerance for such outbursts existed in the workplace or law-abiding social circles. How many system kids ended up system adults? But what guarantee of improvement came from a stricter environment? The extreme of a near-lockdown home for Charlie struck David as not only overkill, but oppressive. David propped his foot on his vacated chair. If only you'd heard him weeping over the abuse he's endured, or seen him last night, working like a pro to clean his mess, or his apology offered as though his behavior broke his heart. He expected me to send him to bed without food. The boy worked at the art of punishing himself. It showed as he sat in the far corner of his room, his knees pulled to his chin, appearing every bit an orphan. He hid from good and resigned himself to tragedy. David flipped up his palm from his knee. I told him we want what's best for him. He needs us to stand by him, Ruth, not turn him over as someone else's problem. I am not. Not you, exactly. He rolled his head in regret, not meaning to accuse, but she bore the dreaded news he fought and prayed against. He intended to aim his ire at the county worker for the injustice of it all if given the chance. I'm just saying Sharon is robbing Charlie of his stability and progress.